The sixth sign of the birth of Jesus.
The narrative story of the Bethlehem star revolves around Elizabeth. We're told that Elizabeth, once she conceives, decides to hide herself for 5 months. When we read this passage, most often as Bible students, it's a curiosity as to why she's hiding herself 5 months. And many people will maybe surmise or suppose one reason or another. When we find out the accurate reason why she's hiding herself, we're pleasantly surprised, and it also helps us to actually understand with more certainty what season Jesus would be born. We learn from Luke chapter 1, verse 7, that Elizabeth had the misfortune in her life to be barren, and she was now an elderly woman. She's well stricken in years. We're not told exactly how old she is, but I think we can presume that she's beyond the years that you would normally have children, beyond the years in which your hope for having a child is lost. And this is normal for women. They have a threshold of years where their biology can handle having a child. And then that number of years goes past a certain biological point in which it's very unlikely, if not impossible, for them to ever have children again. And then we're told as Elizabeth has aged and likely gone well beyond the possible years of bearing children, that she took this opportunity when she learned that she had conceived to hide herself for 5 months. And her reasoning, her cause for doing this had something to do with the fact that God had showed this great kindness to her, and she was going to use it to try to erase the reproach among men that she had received for being barren. Unfortunately, in that culture, bearing children was a sign of blessing from God and a great source of pride, and that it was not medically known that it could ever be due to the father that a woman couldn't have children. That would probably be presumed that it could only be because of the woman in which she couldn't have children. And so the blame, as it were, was put on the woman. Whereas, and the woman was not able to give the husband any children, let alone herself. And so it was a disservice to the husband. And this is an awful thing for society to do to anyone. And to have lived with this sort of societal scorn all your life would be a very unhappy and unkind situation. And we're told that Zacharias and Elizabeth were both righteous before God, and they walked in all the commandments and the ordinances of the Lord, blameless manner. So they really followed the law, and they had the law in their hearts and in their actions in a righteous way. And so this made them particularly blessed people and were highly esteemed. Now, because Zacharias was highly esteemed amongst the Levitical priesthood, he was given the opportunity uh, above many, many others to be able to even participate in the lottery, in the lot, to have an opportunity to fulfill the service of burning the incense in the morning and the evening during his course week. Now, burning the incense is done by being able to enter into the inner area where the menorah, candlestick, and incense bowls and so on. You had to be held in higher esteem to receive the highest order of positions, of duties within the temple service. Of course, only the high priest could ever go once a year into the most holy place. As a result of this, Zacharias, we presume, would have been in a position where he interacted in his job members of the Levitical priesthood of the higher ranks, a higher society. And as a result, when they had social gatherings and times of discourse and connection, he would be with his wife and the other members of that order. And so when it says that Elizabeth suffered the reproach of men, it's likely not just any old men around and neighbors, which it could have easily been as well, but it's also men of the high order. And so that it's that much more painful to be suffering reproach of the highest order of the priesthood society. And so she hatches this plan to hide herself for 5 months in order to reverse that reproach amongst those kinds of men as well as just men in general. And so it just makes it that much more acute as to why she's so determined to hide herself for 5 months and then reveal herself, clearly pregnant, more all of a sudden. And that's what hiding does. You hide it, and then when you can announce it, you're actually showing. So it has a much more dramatic effect. It wouldn't be as dramatic if you say you're pregnant and yet you're not even showing. You don't see any proof or any evidence. So that just wouldn't be or convey quite as much of the sort of drama that she's looking for.
We're looking at the course of Abia charting. And what we want to see is, where does the 5th month land? In the first week, I'll blow this up, the date is May the 10th. That's the solar eclipse on a Saturday morning. And Zacharias, if he was serving that day, which we don't know for sure, he would leave in a few hours after serving the morning. The verse tells us that as the days of his ministration were accomplished, he departed for his house. So it couldn't be that Gabriel visits on an eclipse Saturday morning, in which Zacharias is going to leave in just a few hours, because the verse clearly tells us that he had to go through days, multiple days, to finish his administration. And so if you add up the days, you can see up here it's 5 months is 147.5 days, lunar months. And so it works out to 21 weeks, or 147.5 divided by 7 is 21 weeks. And so if you count the 21 weeks, the conception would start week 10. And because if Gabriel was visiting May 10th, that would be 0. And then we're allowing 2 weeks for him to finish his course and get home, and then get Elizabeth pregnant. And so number 1 would start here on May 31. And there's the conception. There's 15 days to finish the first 24-week cycle, and then 21 days on the right. That would be the 5 months. And you can see there's nothing going on during that week. No holidays, no festivals, nothing. However, if you go with this one, where Zacharias serves November the 2nd, Sunday evening eclipse, and then you allow 2 weeks for the travel time and to finish his course, and then start counting the 5 months, you come down to 21 weeks is Passover. April the 10th is the Saturday. April the 14th is the Tuesday, full moon, 5 months. And so now we learn that the reason Elizabeth is waiting 5 months from her conception is that she knows that's going to land on the Passover. And she wants to go to the Passover in Jerusalem, where everybody is going to be, all her friends, all her family. She's going to be showing her pregnancy, and she can show it off and be the talk of the town for the whole 8-day feast. She may also be socializing in that time frame with her husband's colleagues, the upper echelon of the priesthood, and they also will be excited for her, so that she will be alleviated of this condescension that she'd received her whole life for never being able to provide children for Zacharias, and never being a reproach amongst men anymore. The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the 15th of Nisan. Here it reads April 12th, but we know from the astronomy application that the full moon was April 14. And it's just the tool here that's off by a couple of days. It's the Passover according to that the sun is in Aries. And of course, the astronomy application is the most correct, and it confirms that the full moon is indeed in April 14. Here's a look at April the 14th, 6 BCE. This is sunset, 1904 p.m., and the sun is in Aries, which is what Josephus said it would be whenever there's Passover in his day, and he's born about 50 years or so after this time frame here. But so when he was writing, it was around 80, 90 AD. The full moon is in the justice scales. Let's take a look at some verses to make sense of that particular positioning of the moon at this time in reference to the coming of John the Baptist and Jesus. And so we see this set of verses in Luke 1, 71, 70 to 74, that we be saved from our enemies, and that's related to justice and those who hate us, and to perform the mercy, right? When you give mercy, that's justice and grace, and being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, again, is the prophecy related to the outcome of the work of John the Baptist and Jesus to follow. That ultimately the world would be rid of the sin, which is the enemy of God. And in a sense, it's the antithesis of God is sin. And we will receive justice through Jesus. We have justification, right? We're justified in Christ. And so this full moon is in the justice scales. The lunar eclipse of April the 14th of 7 BCE is the sign that represents Elizabeth hiding herself for 5 months. And the reason why this is such an appropriate sign, very faint, very light gray shadow. It's going to come from the bottom right-hand side of the moon, and it's only going to last for 2 hours. And you'll see it if you look very, very, very carefully, because it's hidden. It was very hard to find, and it's hard to see because she was hiding. So her pregnancy was hard to find and hard to see. And that's why this is the hidden shadow lunar eclipse. You might be able to see it. And there, it's moving back now. You can see it moving there. Okay, we're going to come back again. You see it there on the right-hand side? I'm moving it back and forth on the right-hand side. There, and it goes back and forth. See? All right. So if I go back, you see it come. There it is. Right? You see it there moving on the right hand side. Now it's at the polar end, and it goes past the polar end, and now it's moving down and to the right. There, it's moving down to the right. So you can see that there. You see it? You can see a pretty good shadow there. It's very faint. It's hidden. It's the hiding shadow, because she's hiding her pregnancy. And not easy to see, and it wasn't easy to find. It's listed in NASA's catalog, and I originally looked at it and didn't see anything and decided it didn't show up in above Israel. But upon further investigation, it does, and it is a lunar eclipse above Israel. It's just that it's a hiding shadow, very difficult to see. But you can see it moving, and it is there. And that's the lunar eclipse of Elizabeth hiding her pregnancy. What we're looking at here is the table of dates where we're going to begin with the conception of John and go right through to the birth of Jesus. It's 280 gestation days for John, 280 gestation days for Jesus, minus the 88 days that they overlap. This is the about 3 months that Elizabeth and Mary spent together, where Mary had just conceived and she left at the end of 3 months when John was being born. So that's about 4 days shy of 3 months. So it totals up to 472 days. We start with John the Baptist, conceived full moon November the 18th, and we looked at that in a previous video. And in these first 2 columns, you work your way down. And here is Elizabeth at 5 months, April the 14th, 147 days. And it goes down to the bottom. And then it just repeats or continues back up top again and goes all the way down, column S. And we're going to get down to 472 days, and it's March the 5th. That's the birthday of Jesus. And this is also an Adar 15. And the Adar 15 is Shushan Purim. Shushan Purim. And this is the most festive holiday that Israel has. It began in the book of Esther. You can read about it. And she was about 500 years before Jesus was born. And they've been celebrating it from that time to now, every year, celebrating the birthday of Jesus, who they do not believe is their Messiah, yet they're celebrating his birthday every year.